You are watching NovaNow.tv, independent community media for Northern Virginia.
Hello and welcome to NovaNow.tv. My name is Sam Otero and I am absolutely thrilled to be your host for this new talk show pilot program where I plan to put my 30 years experience as a digital media producer, community leader, musician, and educator to work for you. That's why I founded NovaNow on July 4th, 2021. This new channel is all about Northern Virginia and the amazing people that make it such a great place to live and do business. And it's my sincere hope to use this new platform to explore life in Nova, digging deep into the issues and the news that matter. And tonight, we start out by looking at one of the most important issues of our day, of any day really, and that is education. Of course, Nova has been in the national news for the past year or so now as the epicenter for educational reform. Grassroots efforts all across our nation are springing up, and parents have been motivated to take a much more active role in their children's educational experience. And if the pandemic has shown us anything, it's made very clear that there are some deep concerns about our educational systems in America. But tonight, we are not going to focus on the myriad problems. Rather, we're going to start this series on a positive note, and we're going to talk with educators who are dedicating their lives to making a difference through alternative models. And it's my hope that anyone listening to this will come away inspired and hopeful that real change can happen. And ultimately, it starts right at home. So I give you tonight's show on our new platform. Welcome to NovaNow.tv. Tonight, education in Nova. What's right, what's wrong, and now what? And my guest this evening coming to us from the now infamous Loudoun County to talk with us about their views on education and an innovative model that is taking root in the Leesburg area through an endeavor called Embark Center. First up, Catina Sweedy. Catina has been a program advisor for the Embark Center for Self-Directed Education in Leesburg, Virginia since 2018. She is an avid lecturer about homeschooling, video game education, and self-directed education. Catina has presented at the Virginia Homeschoolers Conference, the Northern Virginia's Women's Summit, MineFaire, and the Alternative Education Resource Organization Conference. And she's been featured on the Unschool Files, Working While Homeschooling, and Classcast podcasts. Additionally, Catina is a homeschool parent of 2 teenagers, a Mojang certified Minecraft educator, and a member of the Alliance for Self-Directed Education, the National Youth Rights Association, and the Organization of Virginia Homeschoolers. Her master's degree work at Manhattan School of Music focused on writing and performing cross-curricular educational concerts and teaching music clinics for underprivileged children throughout New York City. Catina, welcome to Nova Now.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk with you tonight.
Hey, I'm honored that you have the time. That's quite a resume that you sent us there. It's impressive, and we thank you for what you're doing and what you're going to do tonight to enlighten people as to alternative models. And next to me, we have Mr. Jim Dunning, another Loudoun County educator. He spends a lot of time with books, music, cameras, and photography equipment, as well as white papers and a bike, all of which he says keep his marriage healthy. Working in public education for the past 15 years or so has resulted in two things. Number one, he says, a validation that a focus on autonomy and agency is key to successful learning. And two, coaching debate and speech are a lot of fun. Jim is a lifelong unschooler, much of it done surreptitiously until recently, and he's now just plain old obnoxious and in your face about it. So, Jim, I gotta say, you came to the right show, because I've been accused every now and then of being slightly obnoxious. So, welcome to Nova Now TV.
Oh, thank you. Glad to be here.
This is a real joy for me, both of you. I can't thank you enough for taking your time out of your busy schedule, but more than that, for what you're doing for our communities, and more than that, for our children. Because let's face it, our kids are the future of our world, are the future of this country. And, you know, there is a crisis in education right now. And I'm grateful that the both of you wanted to join me tonight to talk about solutions rather than harping on and focusing on the problems. And let's face it, there are a lot of problems in education. So why don't we start out, Catina, since we started with you, when I contacted you on social media a few weeks ago, through your work at the Embark Center. Why don't we start the conversation telling us about the Embark Center, Jim? Then we'll come back to you and we'll talk about your work in education as well, and your affiliation with the Embark Center. So, Catina, you have the floor. Tell us about Embark Center.
Thank you. Embark Center for Self-Directed Education is Northern Virginia's only true self-directed education learning hub for students ages 6 to 18. We're actually, unfortunately, the only one in Virginia now that is truly self-directed. And what that means is the children that come to our center are free to choose what they want to work on, how they want to work on it. They have the time to pursue their own interests. The way we structure our Embark Center is that it is a non-compulsory learning center, and all of the programming is actually created by the students themselves. So they create their classes, they create and ask for whatever tutorings that they want to have. And we also have a mentor-mentee structure. So I'm one of the program advisors along with Andrea Kubela-McKay, the founder of Embark Center. So our members that we like to call the people that come to Embark can meet with either one of us as their mentor for help with achieving their goals, making goals, even finding out if their goals really are their goals and not society's goals or what they think other people should think that, or what other people think they should be doing. So it's a very different way of approaching education because it's very individual. And yet, because we're a community of learners that are together in the same space, we have a building in historic Leesburg, it's also very, very much community based. So the students themselves run the whole center in addition to creating their programming.
Interesting. And one of the things that struck me when you and I first started talking in regards to this philosophy, I spent 14 years as a career and technical education teacher. So I not only taught a craft and, of course, the skills and life skills that are necessary to explore careers and attain a career. Very much a similar model. It was hands-on. The kids learned by doing. So it may sound to, especially parents out there who know their kids, and maybe they're looking at this going, how does this gonna work? I mean, we as the adults are supposed to be teaching the youth of tomorrow, right? We're gonna entrust the education to a 13-year-old to just do what you want, when you want, however you want to do it, and then go out into the great big world and succeed. Well, one of the issues that we have is there's this myth, and Jim, you touched on it when we did our pre-interview yesterday. There's a myth that our current education system is actually preparing the kids for the real world, whether it higher education or the workforce. Talk to me a little bit about that. How did we get to this place in American society?
One thing that I look at, because I deal with a lot of students who are very focused on college as being their next step, and pretty much school. And many of our community leaders focus on that K through 12, and especially the high school is supposed to prepare you for college. The challenge here is that if you look at the results of college, where barely 50% of the students who entered their freshman year actually complete college, it would make us, or it should make us stop and think, are we doing the right thing? And that's not a criticism of the people that are in it. It's more a critique in a positive sense of the system. Because pretty much what we have, like 100,000 school buildings across the country. That's the best number I've been able to determine. And you know what? They all do it the same way. They all look the same. I look at TikTok videos of students doing things in their classrooms, and no matter where they are, actually, even if they're outside the United States, I have a hard time seeing a difference between where they are and the room I'm in during that day, or the various rooms I'm in. But it still comes back to when I'm talking with students about what do you see doing? What do you see you're going to be doing with your life after high school? Um, whether it's like the immediate thing of college, or what are you going to do after college? They really don't have much of an idea other than what society and what their parents are telling them. And again, these are all well-meaning messages that they're getting, but does it fit in with reality? And I can't help but see that, like, again, that barely 50% of the people that enter college actually complete. That's a disconnect, because if we're actually doing a good job of preparing them for college, one must wonder, are we really doing that good a job if it's only, 1 out of 2, or 4 out of 10, or excuse me, 6 out of 10 that are actually being successful in any way. Then once they're getting out of college, some of the statistics point to that about 80% of the college graduates are underemployed or unemployed. Now, certainly unemployment is at one of the lowest points it's been in a long time. In fact, at the federal level, there's serious discussion about what is the lowest employment that you can go, which speaks well, especially coming out of a tough time of the pandemic. But again, you still have to deal with the fact that 70 to 80% of people see themselves as underemployed. So we're not doing a good match with higher education. So we should be looking at how can we do it better. And so, as I mentioned to you in the pre-show interview, when we're asked, is something like self-directed education, gee, that's crazy. Why would you do that? There's an assumption that what we're doing now is actually working as well as it should be or could be. And I'm saying we have to be critical of that. Again, in a positive sense, we need to critique it to better understand how can other alternatives best serve not just students, but their families and society in general.
Well, Catina, let's bring that back to you and play off of this a little bit. As far as the Embark Center goes, and I don't want people to think that this is a commercial for the Embark Center. My plan is to focus and feature people that are doing innovative things to make Nova a better place to live in general. And there are other alternative schools out there doing great things from what I'm learning. I'm relatively new to the area and I'm meeting some great people, learning about all kinds of cool success stories. Um, Talk to us a little bit about what the Embark Center is doing in that particular model that you're employing, how it's advancing the concerns that Jim just brought up, and the deficiencies that we've learned over the years that our public education system has in regards to preparing students for the real world.
Yeah, that's a great topic to talk about with self-directed education.
Hmm.
And like you said, Embark Center isn't the only place in the world, even though unfortunately we're the only one like us in Northern Virginia. There are also people that homeschool, and they do a version of homeschool called Unschooling. There are other kinds of self-directed learning schools called Sudbury schools or agile learning centers. So this is not an unusual kind of movement. But what's unusual about it in society at large is letting young people hold the reins of their own education. And what we've seen at Embark Center and other self-directed learning centers is that when kids are allowed to choose what they want to learn, they have ownership over it and intrinsic motivation into it. And that way, when they go on to their next steps in their adult life, be it going to college or starting in their career right away or traveling or starting their own businesses, it's because they want to. They are invested in it because it's coming from within them. They're not being told that they need to go to English and math and history and science. They are choosing whether or not they want to do things like that. And we have found that our members actually really do deep dives into things. So they're not just doing history, they're doing World War II battles in France, or they're doing the history of fashion or hairstyles. And by doing these deep dives into things that they are really interested in and passionate about, it just continues and it grows within them. So as they get older, they can make these choices about what they want to do with their lives because they know themselves in a way that other children unfortunately don't have the freedom to do. When they're going to school for 8 hours a day and they're being told what they need to learn, whether or not that's something that has value to them, and then they have to take that homework home with them and then spend hours doing that, they don't have time to really get to know themselves and pursue what they're interested in. So a self-directed learning center like Embark or Unschooling or one of these other self-directed learning environments allows kids to actually really get to know themselves and pursue what they're interested in. It is not easy. It's really hard, especially when you come from a long time being in school. You have to go through what we call a deschooling process. It's this process of learning to hear your inner voice again and trust yourself that you can actually pursue the things that you're interested in. But what we have seen is that these kids really know themselves really, really well, and they're able to make very informed, conscientious decisions about their next steps based on their needs and what works best for them.
Jim, you had made an interesting comment when we spoke the other day regarding making these decisions as a family, right? And the moral and my notes here, the moral and the ethical issues that are tied with making such a weighty decision as to how and where are you're going to invest years and years and years and some good amount of money into an alternative education. Talk to me a little bit about that. Because you said it's not just the hot button issues that we're seeing in the media right now, whether it's well, I don't even need to go there. We all know what we're seeing and the concerns that parents are bringing up in terms of ethical and moral considerations that they have and qualms and problems they have with what's going on in the schools. But you said to me yesterday, it's not just about the teachers or the administrators, it's also the parents and how they're approaching their kids' education.
hmm Um, Actually, it really comes down to, I think, what we view as in society as what is success for any of us. And with traditional schooling, we've built up this image that success is getting through, K through 12 successfully, going on to college, and making money. And I'm not like being a hippie or something and saying that money is important, because it certainly is, because you need to put a roof over your head and feed you and your family and all of that. But what we've got is a society that focuses on traditional education, our K through 12 systems, even private schools that are essentially modeled after them, as being the only road to success. And we and so what happens when it comes to, well, let's take families. Parents essentially hand off to the school system responsibility for their child deciding for their child, which is really what happens most frequently or most often. What are you going to do with your life? Rather than the family itself working and deciding what's best for that person. And even there, and I think what I was referring to specifically is that even as a parent, I even stop quite abruptly from telling my child what he should do with his life. And so I'll give you an example. So as early as age 5 or 6, our son decided he was going to be the next Steven Spielberg. And we thought that was great because at that age, he started developing an encyclopedic knowledge of every movie ever made. Also every video game, starting with Mario Brothers, because that's all storytelling as well. And we just thought it was the coolest thing, even when he'd stand at our shoulders at the end of dinner and talk for 3 hours, make up a story and tell us it. He thoroughly enjoyed it. It was his passion. So at that point in his life, he knew what he was going to do, which is rare for any of us. But he pursued it, and we never stood in the way. He gets into high school, where just about everything in high school, other than the social element, was of no interest to him. It did nothing to help him be Steven Spielberg. More importantly, it stood in the way of us having a nice retirement home in Malibu. We're still waiting for that. But we would constantly get from his counselor that he needs to bring his grades up. He needs to do his homework. He actually needs to do work in class because no college is going to accept him with his grades being the way they are, or none of the good colleges. And so we pretty much as parents just said, yeah, so what? I guess we were somewhat concerned that he might not graduate because that might not be a good thing, but I have a different opinion on that now. But at the time, it was something that was in the back of our mind, but we never once said, you have to do school stuff, because there was nothing at school that would help him get his dream. The funny thing is, so he graduates from actually the same school I'm at now. He graduates and he heads off to Hollywood. Okay. He did go to film school for a year, which was very intensive and I think worth it given the connections that he made at the time. And he immediately started working on films. His first film was actually a Christopher Nolan film right before the Batman trilogy. So he was fortunate in that sense. He's still there in his mid-30s, doing exactly what he wants to do. And now that I'm involved in Embark, I actually did have a conversation with him last year. And I said, Colin, at any point, did we ever say to you, you should be doing something that's going to ensure you get a paycheck, that you can make a living?
Sure.
And I could have said that.
It's okay to have a dream, but have something real to fall back on, kid.
Right.
Right, exactly. We've all heard that.
He said, no. He said, you were entirely supportive. We drove him to community theater, to youth theater things.
That's awesome.
We didn't harp on him about his homework, which would have been very hypocritical for me, considering my tenure as a student in K through 12 and including college as well. But we knew this was his passion. So I think about this when I see students that I get to know pretty well because, especially through my activities with debate and speech coaching, that I get to see things outside of their classrooms. And I know students that have incredible artistic talents, drawing, photography, singing, other types of music, sports, and all of them, without exception, are not pursuing that as a career because they've been told that you have to be an engineer or a doctor, Oh yeah, those are your only two choices. Okay. And I'm just thinking, and it's not their parents, and I understand where their parents are coming from. Their parents love them. We very much worry that they not have a stable life, that they not be able to provide for themselves and for a family if that's what they choose to do. And certainly that came to mind when our son moved away.
Sure.
But his happiness was so much more important. But again, I understand where parents are coming from. But I also know the conversations that counselors at school have with those same students. Get your GPA up, or else the schools that you want to go to won't accept you.
Right.
You need to take more AP classes. You need to take math all the way up to senior year, even though you suck at it. So this is what our society expects of our youth. And this, is what we see in films like Race to Nowhere. It's schools that focus on we're building leaders, which doesn't make sense because not everyone can be a leader and not everyone wants to be, nor should they be. Or the reality is that we're a mix of being leaders and followers and something in between all the time. But the message students get at school is you need to be a leader, and therefore you have to be 6 officers in, 5 different, extracurricular activities.
Right.
And so, so I'm trying to remember what the original question was, but I think it gets back to ethically and morally, should we as adults, even as parents, really be telling our kids what they need to do with their life and how they're going to do it? And again, it's tough. Parenting is tough. And I'm envious of Catina that she adopted homeschooling early on, because I didn't even really think about it. But in hindsight, I would have that's the wrong word. I would have provided the option to our son to do Embark or to do something else. And unfortunately, young people are limited what they can do by laws, child labor laws. And That's not to say that labor laws are in themselves bad or that the intentions are good. But it is hard for young people to get real life experience when they're ready to do it or when they're interested to do it in doing it. And I just think even back to my 4 years in college, I had a great time. I had a great time socially. I enjoyed the classes I took. Not a single one had anything to do with what I've done after that. And so for me, I can also look at 4 years of college as 4 years that I could have started earlier in doing life. So I'll stop talking now for a bit.
And think of all those white papers that you could have read.
I know. Or
you were missing out, man. You were missing out.
I was.
So Catina, advice to parents.
Yeah.
That's really what we want to do here. We want people, look, stay with the status quo, right? Stay in the system as it is. Shut up, sit down, write an email every now and then, but otherwise just go along and get to the 12th grade and move along. Fight the system, as we're seeing parents doing all over the nation. And on many levels, I applaud that, because there's a lot wrong and a lot needs to change. So I think it's great that parents are finally stepping up en masse and are taking charge of what's happening in their communities at a school board level. May disagree here and there with particular motivations or tactics that are being used, but the fact that they're waking up to the importance of their education and that they're going, a lot hasn't been happening in here the way that I think it should, and getting more active and involved. I think that's great. So stay with the status quo, change the system from within, become the system, or seek out alternative models. All while we're just trying to pay the bills, and we're just trying to do what's right, trying to figure out what's right in life in general, and navigating this crazy world. Like you said, Jim, parenting is tough. Catina, where do you start with a parent that comes to you and is just befuddled and confused? And I know there are a lot of folks that are out there that are watching this right now, and that's why we're doing this show.
That's a great place to actually start is when parents come to us. And parents
Yeah.
come to us
How
with
do you
many different
start?
reasons.
What are
Yeah,
you going to
and
say to them?
well, and people come to us for many different reasons, but the main reason that people find Embark is that school hasn't worked for their child. And this is when we open up the conversation and we start talking about expectations. And that's really what we're talking about earlier with what Jim was talking about with what is success. We all, as parents, want our children to be happy and
Sure.
successful, but what is success? And that is usually where we start. We ask parents what they are hoping will happen for their child. And then we talk about what is actually really happening for their child. Because a lot of times parents see school and they see their kids doing all the AP classes and being in all the leadership roles, and not everybody can be the valedictorian, right? We only get one of those. So the pressures that we put on children to be, everybody has to be a leader, everybody has to be first chair in band, everybody has to be captain of the whatever team. These are very unrealistic expectations, and kids are really buckling under this. This is a really hard place to put our children in. And yet, as parents, it's also a very hard place for us to be in, because that is what we are constantly told is success. So this is usually where we start. We ask parents to think about what they envision and what is actually happening. And then it is hard to talk about an alternative education because it's not something people usually plan on. And I do joke a lot that I feel like a snake oil salesman when I say to somebody, especially a parent that's really had a lot of struggles with their child, when I say your child doesn't have to go to school. They don't have to go to school to live a happy, successful life. They can still get a diploma. You can get a homeschool diploma. You can drop out of school for a little bit and you can go back in. Now, there's a caveat. It's a little harder to get back into high school, but in elementary school years, you can drop back in and go back into school. It is absolutely doable. And for some of the kids that are really struggling through high school, we'll say things like, you can leave high school. You can graduate early with a homeschool diploma if you feel ready, because our homeschool laws that we have in Virginia are very, very homeschool friendly. But we have a lot of people that actually opt into going to community college early. So you can start going into community college when you are 16, even younger, with a waiver. We have many school districts in Virginia where you can go to school part-time with a core subject. So you can just go in for biology and you don't have to do the other classes in school, and you can homeschool for the rest. There are a lot of options to be flexible with how you're going about your education. So we talk these things through with parents because a lot of times these children are really, really suffering. And we say things like, well, what is your kid really into? What do they do? What do they like to spend their time with? And we get wonderful, amazing answers. Well, my daughter's growing a tea garden, or my son is really into baking, or I've got a kid that's really into blacksmithing and he built his own forge so that he can make chainmail that he researched that's from the 1400s. And school is holding them back from doing these things. We get other parents that are saying things like, my kid, we're just happy if they get up in the morning, right? They're really lost. And what we encourage parents to do is to let go of these expectations, to come back to that parent-child relationship of love and trust and nurturing. It's okay. You don't have to fight with them over homework like what with Jim was talking about with his son. It's okay to let these things go. And it is surprising how many of the unschooled kids go on to colleges. They go on to great jobs. Colleges are really interested in homeschool transcripts now because they don't look like any other kid's transcript. They really stick out. I mean, if Jim is saying there's 100,000 schools, right? Think about how many valedictorians there are out there and how many people, they do all the things that they're supposed to do in school, and then colleges are getting applications from those hundreds of kids that all look the same, and your kid is the one that hiked the Appalachian Trail, or your kid is the one that volunteered at the barn for special needs kids. So all all of a sudden, by not going to school, it does open up the world of possibilities. It's just very hard to trust. And we have to be honest, this is a place of privilege. Not everybody can homeschool. Not everybody can send their kid to an alternative education institution. Luckily, Embark is a nonprofit, so we don't turn anybody away for an inability to pay. But there are a lot of options out there for people. It's just hard to trust this process when we come from a society that just doesn't trust children and frankly doesn't trust parents.
It's interesting too. Well, there's a lot of reasons, well-founded reasons for that. I mean, again, that's a topic for another show, but this terminology that we've been throwing around here, let's dig into this a little bit. Okay. We talked about unschooling. We've talked about self-directed education. We've talked about not unlearning, which is a topic that, or a term that was used recently, erroneously to describe some of these models, deschooling, self-chosen, right? Let's throw some definitions out there. And what does that look like? If you got a parent coming in, I'm coming in, Jim, I'm going to meet with you. I'm going to learn what you're doing there and Embark. And feel free, this doesn't have to be back and forth between the two of you. We can have just a vibrant discussion here. So Jim, or Catina, if either of you want to just jump in and into the conversation, please feel free to do so. But throw these words out there. What are they? What do they mean? And what does it look like? Jim, what is unschooling?
Unschooling, and actually you should start with Catina on this because she's actually...
Well, you guys handle it together. Here, I'll put two of you on the screen. Go ahead.
But unschooling is where, at least from my perspective, where the learner is not being told what to do as far as how to learn something, what their interest should be, or extrinsic rewards or even extrinsic structure. Here's your curriculum. Even if you tell me that your goal is to be a pediatrician, I'm going to tell you actually right down to minute steps, how you're going to get there. And nowadays it's actually starting in 5th and 6th grade. Because especially in Loudoun County, and this isn't true in every school system across the country, but kids are being prepped for the right college, as early as 5th and 6th grade, if not earlier. If we see like on some television shows where it's often not parody, where getting into the right preschool determines which Ivy you get into. But unschooling is where you ask the learner, the human, what do you want to do? And it doesn't have to be, what do you want to do when you're 30? In fact, it's more important, what do you want to do now? What do you want to do today?
Yeah. You have an opportunity to learn something. You have an opportunity to exercise your talents that are innate and make you feel good. What do you want to work on?
Right.
So Jim alluded to me taking this one, and I'm jumping in because I do have one of my favorite unschool stories.
Yeah, please go.
And if we want to talk about moral and ethical implications of school, one of the ones that my husband and I discussed very early when we were parents was whether it was moral or ethical to force somebody to go to school. Learning should be your own personal journey. We felt very strongly about it. So when our daughter was 4 and it was time for preschool, we said, do you want to go to preschool? And she said no. And I had worked at a wonderful preschool, and I was like, okay, that's fine. And then when kindergarten came around, we said, do you want to go to kindergarten? And she said no. And now, I asked them this year, I said, do you want to go to your senior year? And she said no. And so when they were really little, I did traditional homeschooling. I got the workbooks and the curriculum. We took the dining room table out, and we put desks in it, and we put a big chalkboard up and a whole tiny little classroom that lasted about 1 hour because everybody just wanted to snuggle up on the couch and do the workbooks and read together. But my son was not going to read. There was absolutely no way this 4-year-old was going to read, this 5-year-old was going to read, this 6-year-old was going to read. And when he was 6, I was starting to panic a little bit. I'm thinking, well, he should be reading by now. I mean, this is what's supposed to be happening. And I said, we're going to try all these thousands of curriculum to learn how to read. And he really fought back, and he had my number because one day he said, the only reason you're making me learn how to read is that you can brag about it at park day with the other moms that I'm reading Harry Potter. And I remember thinking,
was that legit?
Oh yeah, it was totally legit. I was in my mind, I'm like, because he's a smart kid, so he should be reading, way above grade level. Not that he ever was in any grade, right? But it was damaging my relationship with my child. He was 6 and I was fighting. I was fighting with him and he was fighting back. There was no way he was going to learn how to read because I was really pushing it. And I said, fine, it's on you. You do it. You teach yourself how to read. I've read about you unschool kids that teach yourselves how to read. So then I stopped. I left him alone. I still read to him because I love reading to him and he loves that. So we have books around the house and we go to museums. We're doing all of our fun things. And he's not reading. And he's 7 and he's not reading. And he's 8. And I look over when he's 8 and he's sitting really quietly on the couch and he's got an iPad, and I just come around the corner and he's reading Minecraft Wikipedia, and it's just words, there's no pictures. And I said, well, wait a minute, how long have you been reading? And he's like, I don't know. And he'd been reading because it was important to him. He wanted to do something in Minecraft. He needed to learn how to write. He needed to learn how to figure out how to get to Google and search for what he needed and then look it up and find it. And so he's one of my favorite unschooling stories because he really did do it because it came from within. He really wanted to learn how to read so he could make these Minecraft builds. And what's really fun about unschooling, and I've been, as you mentioned in my interviewed about this before, a lot of times people say, oh, it seems like so much work to build a curriculum based on what students are interested in. But it actually isn't, because they're the ones building the curriculum. They're the ones finding the things, right? And so, he got really into medieval Indian from India weaponry at one point. I remember thinking, there is no way I ever would have picked this. Like, I have no interest in that. That is not on my radar at all. But that was something that meant a lot to him. So my journey with my own children, and I used to work in public school teaching music clinics and things like that too. And meeting children in school that really fit into this self-directed learning kind of model. They would bring me these things that they were learning on their own because they wanted to share it with another adult because they were so excited about it.
Absolutely.
And that's what led me to Embark. It was my own children, their own self-directed learning paths, but also knowing that there were kids that were trapped in school that didn't know they had other ways out. And I wanted there to be a place for them. And once I got to Embark, and Jim can attest for this too, it's so much fun seeing what people are interested in. It really expands your world. And one of the questions we get a lot from parents is, well, if kids go to a place like Embark and they only work on what they want to work on, they're not going to learn all the other things that they're supposed to know, or they're not going to learn all the other things they would be exposed to at school. So they're more sheltered. When in reality, they're much less sheltered because they're surrounded by a bunch of other people that are excited about what they're learning about too. And those people want to share those stories with the other people they're around.
And see, that brings up a basic conceit about how we all see, how society sees public education, which is that, okay, public education or traditional, let's call it traditional education, prepares you for your future. But one of the favorite mantras of every school, especially at the beginning of the school year, is we don't even know what jobs are going to exist in 10, 15, 20 years. And actually, that's a truism. I mean, that's true. We can see that by looking back 10, 15 years in the past and saying, what did we think people would be doing now? And certainly there's a lot of things that still are here, but would we have been successfully predicted which ones would be the winners and the losers? But so the idea is that the classes that we make them take, and I intentionally use the word make because we make them take these classes, somehow prepare them for something that we have no idea what that is. So how is that any better than what we're doing when we ask the young person, what do you want to do? Because I don't see either one being worse or better than the other, except that the better one would be having the person choose, certainly from a moral perspective, but also it's all the research shows that we learn best when we're passionate for something. We
Absolutely.
like all of the research shows that 5 years after you take an algebra class, you've forgotten over half of what you've learned, okay? Because, and this is a truism in college, you only know the stuff until the final exam. It never lasts any longer. Sure. And you know what? Employers know this too, because when employers hire people outside a few select fields, and I worked in human resources for a couple decades, we don't care what you majored in, not in the least. We do care that you got a diploma. And there's a reason for that that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with learning, okay? But we all know that people that have a diploma from college do make more than people that don't. Now, that's only important if you care about the money and happiness, derived from other sources. But employers know that what you learned in college, and then by extension, what you learned in high school, has little value to them. What they do care about is what they teach you and what you learned from their competitors, while at their competitors. And again, this gets back to that in a job, you're much more invested in what you're learning than you ever are in an Algebra 1 classroom or even an AP World History classroom. You're much more invested in it because it matters to you. Now, it sometimes might matter just because of the paycheck. That's a great motivator in many ways. But usually it's because you've chosen a field eventually that is important to you. So you do want to know this stuff. But the other thing about when you're choosing what you should learn when you're 12, 13, 17, 18, or even 20 is looking back on my life. And I think this is true of every person that we would ever talk to. How could you ever predict that you would be where you are now? What was the sequence of jobs or life experiences that got you to this? I don't know anyone except maybe my son, because he's one of the few people that has stuck with his passion for film. But I don't know anyone really other than him that can say, I did this so that I could do this, and that I predicted ahead of time that I would be here. And this is the irony: as parents, we're all in the same boat, yet we want to tell our children that to get to be happy, you need to do this, this, and this in this order. And that's basically what school is about. Unschooling is the opposite. And based on our experiences with unschooling and self-directed education, the success rates of whatever those people, however they measure success, whether it's going off to college or getting a job or whatever, it's pretty good. It's certainly not worse than what school is. And earlier when I said that, barely 50% of the people that go off to college actually complete college, that's not an indictment of the efforts of educators. It should be looked at more like, well, that means about 40 to 50% of the people that go off to college probably should have found another option. And that's where options like Embark are important, because we feel that we can meet the needs of those that didn't find traditional education to be what they needed. And it's sad because most people don't recognize that, and they still think it's kind of like you've got as a child athlete, as a high school athlete, you are convinced that you will be drafted by the NFL or the NHL or NBL or something like that, when we know that statistically not going to happen. But you're always convinced that you're going to be the one. And I think in other pursuits, we have the same thing, that you're going to get accepted by just the right college that will get you into just the right application pipeline at the right company. And then therefore you'll be the happiest person in the world because you found your career. The chances of that are so small. So that's where I think options like Embark, we're here to serve those people where traditional education is not the route to go. So when I said, that we're not preparing kids for college, we aren't, but it's more like we're not offering the right opportunities for them. And again, that's not any of my colleagues in traditional education's fault. It's really society's fault. And that we aren't looking outside of the box. And it's such a cliche term, but it's so true if you think about the box that we have, to the point where traditional school got disrupted by the pandemic and society fell apart because we were no longer taking in kids for 7 or 8, or actually more hours than that a day, physically taking them. And I know that educators bristle at being perceived as daycare, but we have to admit that the calendar, that our society puts school calendar at its core, that we structure our business hours and everything else around that. And we're saying that we should be looking outside of that.
Well, certainly we learned a lot from the pandemic, and a lot of the blowback that the school districts around the country are receiving right now from parents who, for the first time, were seeing what it was that their kids were learning. And they're going, wait a minute, I didn't sign up for this. What's going on? They get more involved, they dig deeper, and now we're in the situation that we're in. We learned a lot about education. We learned a lot about ourselves. We learned a lot about our families and our communities through the pandemic. Besides the obvious, Catina, what do you think? What else did we learn? What else did you learn? What did you folks at Embark learn from the experience that we now call the pandemic in the past year and a half?
One of the big things that I find really interesting is that there were a lot of kids that actually liked virtual learning. And I think that was a big surprise for a lot of educators. There were kids that really, really thrived. There were kids
Jim,
that
you're
didn't
saying,
like.
Yeah. Yeah, you saw that too, huh?
Yeah, Jim, do you want to take that one?
No, you guys go ahead.
I was just going to say, well, I'll just jump in with a short story. I know students that suffered from extreme anxiety when they were in the school building. And that is actually seen as a negative thing by society, even to the point of school refusal results in you have to get a doctor's, not just an excuse, but you have to get a doctor's diagnosis that it's okay for this person not to be in a school building, because we see school as something that's normal to human existence, when in reality, it's only been around for a little over a century. But I know students that were so anxious and even worse, depressed when they were in a school building, just because they were around other people and that they were in the building, that once virtual learning started happening, they flourished. They did well, even by school standards, of getting B's and A's when they were getting F's before. And I would talk to them and I'd say, so what's up? And they go, I don't have to be around other people. I get to do my homework. I get to do my assignments. It's over a screen. I can turn my camera off and I am successful by school standards. Okay. Which is, again, like, it raises the question of, as we went back in person, I was asking people, as a school, is it ethical to require these people, these humans, to return to the building, which was unhealthful for them? So that's an example of where virtual learning, people flourished in it, but we're no longer offering it in the same way. There is online options, but it doesn't have the same, it's not the same environment as what we were doing with virtual or distance learning last year.
And I think the point of this whole show, and what I want parents and even kids that are out there watching, are people that are just involved in their community and concerned about the trajectory our society's on and how they can get involved and help using whatever talents that they have to lend to the equation. There are options, and we said this isn't new. This has been around for a long time, not just homeschooling, not just the concept of unschooling, but these alternative models. I mean, go back into the day to the Montessori schools that we all grew up with, right? Very, very similar type of self-directed learning. Whatever you may think of the models that are out there, works, what doesn't work, myths about them, urban legends that have popped up over the years. The fact is there are options, and that was kind of the whole point of doing this. Is I want parents to understand that there are options, and it's okay to explore, it's okay to question, it's okay to push the envelope, it's okay to band, and in fact you should band together with others in your community that are looking for other options. Cooperatives are popping up. That's a new thing. Well, again, not new, but something that seems to be coming into vogue a little bit, where parents are getting together and hiring teachers on their own. Small home schools that are taking root. So there are options, and I'm hoping anybody watching, please feel free to reach out to any of us. I mean, we're all educators here. These folks know a lot more about the local education market than I do because I'm new to Nova. So I've been finding this an education in myself. Catina, I want to thank you for putting this together, for taking the time, for educating us on these models and these options that exist. You started out the show running down when I had mentioned that Embark clearly is not the only school of this type in this area. You ran down a whole list of other options that are out there. Can you talk a little bit about some of the other models that you're aware of and some of the folks in the area that are doing some great work?
So in this area, we have not as many self-directed education options. There are some micro schools. There are also homeschool services like Compass Homeschool, where you can take many classes. They're in Herndon. There are plenty of parents putting together pods where they're hiring teachers to work with their kids. There are homeschool co-ops that have been around for a really long time, like you were saying. So there are resources out there for parents. A lot of it around here is homeschool based. If you're further out east, there are other kinds of self-directed learning environments like Sudbury schools, such as Fairhaven. If you're further closer to Baltimore, there's Arts and Ideas up there. So we have slim pickings around here with self-directed education centers like Embark. Embark is really the only one in Northern Virginia, but you can create your own. There are a lot of homeschoolers now. It really jumped with the amount of people homeschooling once the pandemic started. So if you're looking for an alternative option, there are other families out there just like you that are jumping into this for the first time that never really thought about it. So that's another good thing, another silver lining that has happened with the pandemic. There are parents that are looking at it differently. They're looking at their children saying, this really isn't working for our child. And there are much more people in that boat that can relate to it, in addition to people that have been homeschooling for decades that are already out there that have years and years worth of wisdom and experience that have been really supportive. So the Virginia Homeschool, or the Association of Virginia Homeschoolers, has been great serving people in our community that are looking for other options that are just fit their children better.
And I think that's the key to focus on, that there are options, and education shouldn't be looked at. We've talked a lot about what it should be, what it should look like. It shouldn't be a one size fits all. Exactly. Right. Yeah. And that's part of the problem that we've gotten into, is that we've bought into that mythos over the generations, that this is what education is and what it looks like, and we corralled everybody into the same building. We taught them the same stuff, and we're forgetting that they're individuals. We're all individuals,
And that's really key, because that is really the basis of what we're doing, is that one size does not fit all, and everyone's interests are diverse. And so one thing that we haven't mentioned that Catina is really close to is that within the self-directed model, the relationship between the adult and the learner is flipped relative to traditional school. So one of the key things that Catina does is she becomes a resource not the person telling the learner what you should do, but responding to the learner, expressing interest, desires, setting goals. She facilitates that,
Right.
certainly, but then she finds the resources. And so that is very, very different than, say, traditional schooling, where the school decides what the resources are and you better find a way to fit into it. Whereas with self-directed education, it's the opposite. So a lot of what Catina and Andrea do at Embark is, if a learner, if a young person wants to learn how to build guitars, they go and find someone that can do that. Hopefully it's someone local, because face-to-face is always good, but sometimes it's an online option. Or they want to study for the SAT because they do want to go to college. So I've been in to help people learn traditional algebra 1 and 2, just so they can do well on the SAT. But this is a huge part of what we do in response to the idea that one size really can't fit all, because as humans, we're extremely different from each other. And it changes over time.
Jump in there, Catina. Go ahead.
Yeah. And it's not just what you want to learn, it's also how you want to learn.
Right.
So when you leave a traditional school environment, you really can take as much time as you need to work on Algebra 1, or you can drop it and leave it. If you don't need to do it and you don't want to do it, that's okay. You don't have to. But one of the beautiful things about leaving a traditional environment is you can do that deep dive into flounders or whatever it is that you're really passionate and excited about learning. You can spend as much time on it as you want to, and you can use as many resources as you can get a hold of. So when people leave the traditional school environment, they also open up their world for more travel and more field trips and more adults in their lives that they get to spend time with to learn about things that they're excited about, because apprenticeships are not new. This is a really, really old way of learning. Yeah. It's such a human way to learn, to share your skills with somebody else that wants to learn it. And another thing that I really want to touch upon, I know that we're talking a lot about traditional school versus a non-traditional school environment, and you asked about what we talk about with parents when they come into Embark for the first time, and we talk about what their expectations are and what the reality is.
Right.
A lot of times people actually go back to traditional school. They decide that they really don't want to go into unschooling or self-directed learning or a place like Embark Center.
That's the importance of having options. We're not trashing the traditional model. For a lot of people, that traditional model is going to work fine. Right.
Yeah. And I just have one note for parents, especially right now, because this is coming out during when kids are going back to school. Yes. It's also okay for you, the parent, if you have a child that is crying about going to kindergarten and you're crying about your child going to kindergarten, it's okay to not go to kindergarten. It's okay to opt out and spend time with your child snuggling and reading. And sure, you can get a box curriculum or not. You can go to the park, you can go to the museum. But that pull that
You're
we
pretty
have as
radical,
parents,
lady.
But that counts too.
It's okay. Keep your kid home and snuggle and read a book and pet the kitty cat.
Totally
you radicals. Well, you came to the right place. Welcome to my house. As I get my views a little bit more known here in Nova, I'm certain that I will be branded a radical. Believe me, I can guarantee. Just by some, just a few.
Jim and I have heard it before.
Yeah, that's all right. Jim, you know what? Why don't we go ahead and close this out? We're going to give some contact information, how people can get hold of you folks and have one-on-one private conversations about your individual needs. Jim, tell us, how did you come about finding Embark, and what do you do there?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we didn't really talk about that.
I mean, I'm trying to think. So I went into education. I actually went to college for it, and then intentionally chose not to do it because I realized it was a big responsibility, that as a teacher, you are actually helping people get ready for life. And at 21, 22 years of age, I hadn't done life yet. In fact, I did a pretty sheltered life up to that point. But I went in and did the real world, which is, by the way, that's what people in traditional school call the outside world. They call it the real world. And so then a number of years ago, I ended up in school as an educator, and I thought I was going to fix the system because I wasn't going into it blindly. I had volunteered at schools, my son's schools, and I realized that it wasn't perfect. But what I really found out when I got into it is that all of the students had such diverse interests and goals that they couldn't explore because the resources weren't there. And again, not an indictment of the people I work with by any means, because they really love kids. They want them to be successful. They're just like parents. Many of them, of course, are parents. But I just saw student after student that had to fit into some multiple boxes to get to wherever their parents or what they thought society wanted to get to. So the autonomy and the agency part became that much more important to me.
Yeah, explain that.
And also,
that was in your bio that you sent me.
It's sometimes really hard. Well, it is. Telling someone else what to do, even if it's for their own good, raises a lot of moral and ethical questions as well as practical ones, because if they don't want to do it, they're not going to do it, or if they do it, they're not going to do it well. So it usually ends up damaging things. The research shows that the number one point of contention between parents and children is schoolwork. Did you do it? Or are you getting your grades that I want you to get, or that school wants you to get?
You're smarter than that. You should try harder, right?
Right.
I tried my best. No, you didn't.
Right. And so why should we damage parent-child relationships in that way?
That's a great
point. And it also, children get depressed at school.
Sure.
And understandably, because they don't want to be doing that. They want to be doing other things. And you can always say, well, pull up your socks and you need to do this because it's what's good for you. But there's research that shows that admissions to pediatric psych wards increase during the school year and decrease during summer. Now, there could be other elements at play there, but it just made me think, is it really productive and is it moral for me to be telling another human what they should do? And then the experience with our own son, where he on his own chose a path that by any traditional standards is successful. But by our standards, we always go two things, and they're probably very closely intertwined. Are you happy? And do you have a good social network? And that I don't even define what that is, but he's happy with his friends. He's happy with his life and the career that he's doing. So how is that a bad thing? I don't see any bad outcomes by doing that. And so a few years back, I stumbled upon a book called Unschooling. And I get bad with names. So Catina, you're going to have to drop the author's name. Oh, and I'm putting you on the spot too, but she's wonderful.
Actually, I brought her back into the scene right at that moment where she was going like this.
Yeah.
So I put her on the spot, brother.
I'm trying to look. The title was just Unschooling?
It's Unschooling with, that's it. And she's at Cato or at Fee.
The Carrie McDonald book?
Yeah, Carrie McDonald. Thank you. I just needed to be prompted.
And today, kids, we're going to explore Boolean searches.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the other thing. I can look it up on this. Why are we making these poor kids memorize all these facts?
Exactly. You got, you need school. You got this thing. Yeah. What do you need to learn? You go to YouTube. You press the button. The guy tells you what you need to know.
Right.
Oh, there's so many other ways. Yeah.
Exactly.
I didn't know the term unschool, but I read her book, Carrie McDonald's book, realized I'd been doing that all my life, which is essentially disappointing every adult in my life, including my parents to some degree. And I thought, this is cool. There's centers that do this. Mm-hmm. So I immediately Googled unschooling, and the number one return was Embark Center for Self-Directed Education.
That's awesome.
And it was 10 miles away from me. So I literally was on their doorstep 2 or 3 days later, They happened to be having an open house, or it was a get to know you thing. So that's when I met Catina. And I immediately walked in the door and found home. It's like, these are my people. They're radical. They cause trouble. They cause, not just like ripples in the pond, but tsunamis in the pond. This is what I want to do. But most important was I got to volunteer there, and hanging out with 13 or 15-year-olds discussing just about anything, whatever they wanted to. And most importantly, what they wanted to was some of the most rewarding learning experiences I ever had for myself. It was very gratifying. And so
That's
I
awesome.
volunteered since then, and am now on the board, and want to make sure that it's a success, that it's a viable option for as many people as possible. So that's how I got there.
Hey, Catina, why don't you give us the last word here? And you had made mention, not to harp on this, but you did make mention, and words do matter, semantics matter. You had stressed to not allude to or mention or say that you're deschooling, that term. You made a point about that. Why is that so important? And what does it mean? I mean, we don't want parents to confuse what they just heard you do with the wrong term.
So what we talk about when we talk about unschooling is that you yourself, regardless of your age, are choosing what you want to learn.
Right.
And so we do use it interchangeably with self-directed learning or self-directed education. And you said deschooling. Deschooling we actually use for people that are going through the process of learning how to not be in school, learning that they can actually control their learning and that somebody else isn't telling them what they need to learn, that they actually have choice in the matter. The one that I wanted to not use is unlearning.
Oh,
but
I chose the wrong word. Okay. Unlearning
okay.
was what you were stressing. Right. Explain that.
As I've been saying, no, we don't do unlearning. In a way, now I want to actually revisit that word, because there are many things in life that we have to unlearn. Like if I learned how to tie my shoes incorrectly, I would have to unlearn the old way and learn a new way. So there is value in that also as well. But we don't use it interchangeably with unschooling, because we are learning when we are unschooling. We're just learning not in school. So there is this wonderful phrase by North Star Self-Directed Learning for Teens. It's the first one of the centers that are like Embark Center. It's in Massachusetts. And they have a saying that is, learning is natural, school is optional.
I like it. And with that, why don't we go ahead and wrap this up? Guys, tell people how they can get hold of you. I'm going to put you up here with the split screen, and we'll put your contact information underneath each of your names, and folks can get hold of you and have a chat. Why don't we start with the website and how they get hold of the Embark Center?
So our website is www.embarkcenter.org. You can email me personally at katina@embarkcenter.org, or you can write to us at info@embarkcenter.org.
Jim, did you want to give out any contact info?
Actually, I can be contacted at Embark as well, jim@embarkcenter.org. That works fine, but actually, Catina as a staff member is in a better position to field questions directly, although I'm happy to talk to anyone.
That's great. Awesome. This was great, guys. And what I'm excited about, there's so much. I'm excited about this platform. I think these types of digital media technologies are so empowering, and there's so many Zoom meetings, and there's so many people out there doing so much great work. I'm really hoping that Nova Now can be a stepping up the game in terms of production value, making making these types of forums a little more aesthetically appealing versus the Zoom forums, right? So we can take something like this. This is what's so exciting about this. We can take this, put it up on YouTube, put it up on Facebook, which we will. We'll reach people, but we can also submit this to local public access on the education channel and reach, cable customers throughout the DC and Fairfax County region. I think that this is an incredibly powerful format. I know I'm honored to be able to be a part of this, and I'm thrilled to be able to launch this effort with this first talk show that we did tonight with people of your quality that are doing such good work in our community. God bless you both. I'm really looking forward to coming up to Embark and seeing what I can do to lend my crazy ideas to the mix and meeting some of the kids and parents and maybe volunteering sometime soon. I'm looking forward to coming on up there and taking a tour. And I'm hoping that you guys see this too as the first in many shows to come. There's a lot that we can do together. So what do you think about what we're doing here?
Oh, this is great.
Great form. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we also have the ability to be able to bring it in live time. I'm not trying to produce this because it wasn't the type of show, but we can bring in any video, any graphics, slideshows, multimedia presentations, anything that you want to bring in live time, bring it in just like what you see on CNN or any other mainstream news source. So a very powerful learning tool as well. I would like to introduce some of your kids that are into technology to what they're seeing here and say, hey, get on there. Let's teach other kids what you know and use this as an interactive platform to reach out into the community. So lots happening. Catina Sweedy and Jim Dunning, thank you so much for joining me and our audience on the premier talk show on novanow.tv.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. I'm going to go ahead and take us out. Well, that was fun and lots more to come. I hope you enjoyed this. I know I did. Thank our guests again and encourage you to get hold of the Embark Center up in beautiful, historic Leesburg. And I will throw this out at you too. Come on the show. You see what we're doing here. Nova Now is all about the counties that make up what we know as Nova or Northern Virginia. So we encourage you to please reach out to me at info@novanow.tv and visit us at novanow.tv on the web and find our phone number. Give me a call and give us a news tip. Let us know what is happening in your part of Nova. And I am Sam Matero coming to you from my home studio in Fairfax, Virginia. Catina, thanks again.
Thank you very much.
Thanks again.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
All right. Peace to you, folks. We'll see you on the web at novanow.tv. I'm Sam Matero, and I am out.